Hello everyone, I am Tim Stanley, columnist at the Telegraph, and welcome to what they're calling our generation's Frost Nixon. I'm going to be in conversation with the former Prime Minister Liz Truss, and we're very grateful for you for agreeing to do this event. Thank you. And we're coming live from the Conservative Party conference in Birmingham. Welcome to those of you in the room, of course, but also to everybody watching on the Telegraph live stream too. And thank you to our audience members and subscribers who have submitted their questions already. I will make sure to leave some time at the end to pose those questions. And in fact, I've replaced some of my questions with readers' questions because they're much better than my ones. So I'm going to plough straight in, and I'm going to ask, is Britain now on the road to socialism?
I think we're already in socialism.
This is it. This is socialism.
We're already a socialist country.
Right.
You know, the government is spending 45% of GDP. We have huge swathes of the economy controlled by regulation and the bureaucracy. And we have a government who is saying we need more of that. We need more taxes, we need bigger government, we need more regulation, we need GB energy, we need the railways controlled by the state. So I think we are well on the way. And ironically, although Britain voted to leave the European Union, our economy has become more of a European-style economy and less of a capitalist economy over the past 14 years.
Right. So the changes began under the Conservatives.
They did.
Right.
Absolutely. And you can see that. You know, we had record taxes under the Conservatives. We had state spending, 45%, which was only equalled for 1 year in the 1970s. And if we look at the fact that debt is now more than 100% of GDP, the cause of that was the Conservative government following on after the Labour government. So it's a cumulative effect of having Blairite and Brownite economic policies and then the Conservatives piling more spending, more debt on top of that. That's what's happened.
We're going to get into some of that, but to be clear, things are going to get worse, aren't they?
Yes.
With Rachel Reeves, electing a Labour government does make a difference.
This makes me very, very sad, because I hate to see our country in the situation it's in. But only today we've seen our last coal-fired power plant close. We've seen the last steel plant that produces from scratch close. We've seen oil refineries close. And you can see that with the highest energy costs in the world, that Britain is on a very, very difficult path. And yes, Labour are accelerating those policies, but I don't think we can say that all of the problems Britain have now is to do with the terrible government of the Labour Party. Now, yes, they're making it worse. Yes, they're talking the country down. Yes, they don't have any of the right solutions. Yes, their analysis is totally flawed. But a lot of the problems we are facing now are as a result of us failing to turn things around. Yeah. You know, we failed to take on the Blairite, Brownite, statist orthodoxy. And the consequence is, first of all, we got the worst election result for the Conservatives since 1834. But secondly, the country is moving in the wrong direction. And I think we have to acknowledge that.
Is there some things they're doing which chime with your growth agenda, though? I mean, for instance, the planning reforms that Rachel Reeves is announcing, Angela Rayner on house building. Is there any stuff in there which you look at and think, oh, I wish, as a Tory, I could have got away with that, but my own MPs were holding me back?
There's only one thing that the Labour government have announced that I support, which is decriminalising the TV licence. That is the only thing that they have announced that is any good. But if you look at their planning policies, they're actually planning to build fewer houses in London than we were. They're not dealing with the basic problem, which is the 1947 Town and Country Planning Act, which essentially nationalised land. They're not dealing with that. They're tinkering. And what I know is that they will not take on the environmental lobby, who cause so much of the problems in trying to get things built, whether it's protection of non-existent bats or, you know, nutrient neutrality, which stopped huge swathes of housing being built. They're not going to take those people on. They're not going to take on the affordable housing lobby, which puts lots of costs again on people seeking to build new houses. So I have no hope that their planning reforms will amount to anything.
They have kept stressing that they would be fiscally conservative and they want to strengthen the OBR, etc. Do you think they're actually going to do that, or do you?
I mean, I don't know where to start with this, but in the last week, we've had reports that Rachel Reeves is looking to take £50 billion off the balance sheet so that she can disguise the fact that Labour is doing extra spending. £50 billion of off-balance sheet spending. And on the subject of the Office of Budget Responsibility, which I believe is a key problem, that Conservatives won't succeed until we get rid of the Office of Budget Responsibility, they have consistently got their forecast wrong. So this week we heard that non-DOMs leaving the country will actually cost the British taxpayer, that by putting up taxes so much that you make the country unattractive, these people will leave and are leaving. Only last year, the Office of Budget Responsibility was telling us, actually I think it was earlier this year, they were telling us that that would bring in $3.2 billion. On other issues, they have proved to be completely wrong. On immigration, they were saying back in 2022 that if Britain cut immigration, that would have a negative effect on our economy. They put out a report this year saying low-skilled immigration does not deliver for our economy. And so I think as Conservatives, we shouldn't just be critiquing the Labour Party, however corrupt they are, however disingenuous they are, however foolish they are. We also need to talk about the state institutions which have consistently failed this country, because what I see Rachel Reeves doing is she's going along with the Treasury orthodoxy. She's going along with the Bank of England orthodoxy. She's going along with the OBR orthodoxy. And we know where that leads. And this is very much what I tried to take on back in 2022. But those people are still in power.
But you see, if they were here, they would say they've got to do all that stuff because of your personal legacy. And I was at the Labour conference last week, and Trussonomics was brought up, and the budget was brought up again and again. How do you respond to that charge that whatever cuts, whatever tax rises they have to make, they are the consequence of the economic legacy of your decision-making?
Well, that's complete economic illiteracy. When I got into government, taxes were already at a 70-year high. The government was spending the amount it was spending. The debt was going up. I tried to turn that around, but the mini-budget was not implemented because organisations like the Bank of England sought to blame their mistakes on me. And frankly, the broad media, what you'd call the political class in Britain, went along with that narrative. Now, earlier this year, the Bank of England produced a report showing that 2/3 of the spike in gilt prices in 2022 were their fault, because they had failed to regulate the pensions markets and LDIs. So why was there a spike in the market after the mini-budget? Answer, the Bank of England's failures. And the Bank of England themselves have acknowledged that, but this isn't being reported widely in the press. In fact, it was the Wall Street Journal that reported it, that then got picked up by the Financial Times. So there is a real lack of interest amongst policymakers, politicians, and the media in reporting what actually happened in 2022. And I think that's bad for the country, and I think it's fundamentally dishonest. So we've got the Bank of England saying that the market crisis was caused by LDIs, which are a particular type of leveraged investment, and the Labour Party and even elements of the Conservative Party are saying that it was my fault. How on earth can we move forward as a country if people can't actually talk about the facts, but instead throw insults around? I just think that's pathetic.
I think I share that analysis. I suspect a lot of people in this room share that analysis. But there are a lot of Conservatives at this conference who don't share that analysis. Theresa May over the weekend wrote that, quote, Our reputation for economic competence was shattered by the budget of September 2022. How do you respond to one of your predecessors saying that?
I mean, I don't know what to say about the 2017 election and our policies on social care and all of... I'm not going to indulge in a slagging match with Theresa May. But what happened was successive Conservative governments went along with the economic orthodoxy. Loose monetary policy, giving control to the Bank of England, accepting the judgments of the OBR. They essentially outsourced economic policy. So it wasn't being decided by the Chancellor, it was being decided by the Bank of England, it was being decided by the Office of Budget Responsibility. I explicitly, back in 2022, had a mandate to take that on. But what I found was that those people and institutions were very powerful. They sought to undermine me. And at the same time, people in the Conservative Party wanted to buy into that narrative. But they are fundamentally wrong
Why
about
did they want
that
to do
narrative.
It? Was that a philosophical disagreement? Is that elite capture on their part? Did they not like your administration?
Well, I think it's elements of all of those things. But why did people in Britain not vote Conservative? Because they felt worse off after 14 years of Conservative government. They were also frustrated by the very high levels of immigration our country had. Those are the fundamentals, and yet very few people in the Conservative Party seem willing to debate the fundamentals that are wrong, and instead like to point to specific events or things that people said. That is not the way people vote. I think it was Bill Clinton who said, it's the economy, stupid. And that was the truth. People feel their wages aren't as high as they used to be, that costs are higher than they were, that their towns and cities they live in have suffered as a result of a stagnant economy. That's why they turned away from the Conservatives, and that's what I sought to change. But I would say Theresa May, along with many other people in the Conservative Party, is somebody who is part of the establishment. And when people voted for Brexit in 2016, and when they voted Conservative in 2019, they voted against the establishment. They voted for change. And that is what we fundamentally didn't deliver. So I think the new divide in British politics is between the establishment and people who want things to really change about our country. And they don't just want a change of the political figures in number 10 in the cabinet. They want a change in the senior figures in the bureaucracy who have presided over our country's decline. That is the change they want to see. And I think fundamentally in the Conservative Party, we're still divided about that. There are still people who think a bit of tinkering here, a bit of change of narrative here, a bit of demonstrating competence here will get us back into power. If people want to vote for the establishment, they have Rachel Reeves, a former Bank of England employee, of which Theresa May is also, of course, a former Bank of England employee. They have Keir Starmer, a former chief of prosecutions and human rights law. Those are the establishment. If people want to vote for the establishment, they're there already.
Yeah.
And this is what I think Conservatives have to recognise, is we are no longer the party of the establishment.
But if those representatives of the establishment were to break into this room right now, if they can get past security, the first thing they would say is, but we won the last election, and you personally lost. People know what you stand for, and they didn't re-elect you.
Sorry, we won the last election.
Labour in the establishment won the last election, but you, the embodiment of the resistance, the people in your constituency rejected you. So how do you explain, if you stand for the people, how is it that the nasty old establishment in the Labour Party won with a landslide, historic one, and you personally lost your seat?
So I lost my seat largely due to reform.
Right.
So reform took a lot of my vote in South West Norfolk. And I was, frankly, in quite a difficult position because I was running under a very orthodox Conservative Party whilst being an unorthodox Conservative myself. So it was quite a mixed message, I appreciate, to the electorate. But that's what happened to us. in many similar seats.
Yes.
Was that because Reform did so well, Conservatives lost and Labour got in. But I don't believe the people of South West Norfolk actually consciously want a Labour MP. People in South West Norfolk want things to change. And they chose two different ways of trying to deliver change, and Labour came through the middle, which will never happen at another election. I think it was a one-off in 2024. But why did people vote Labour? They didn't vote Labour because they were enthusiastic about the Labour Party. They voted Labour because they were fed up that we hadn't delivered. And I still think it's the case that the general public believe that politicians have more power than they actually do.
Right.
So they think that by booting out Rishi Sunak and the Conservatives and putting in Keir Starmer, that they can deliver real change. But my contention is, even though Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves were in power, we still have Andrew Bailey in charge of the Bank of England. We still have Richard Hughes in charge of the Office of Budget Responsibility. We still have the Climate Change Committee. We still have the Migration Advisory Committee. We still have a very powerful bureaucracy. And things aren't going to change that much because the same mentality and mindset is still there. And until we change those things, I do not believe that serious change in this country is possible.
One of our readers asked, if you had battled on in your premiership and held on, do you think that a Tory party led by you would have done better than a Tory party led by Rishi Sunak at the last election?
Yes, I do.
Why do you think so?
Because when I was in number 10, Reform was polling at 3%.
Right.
By the time we got to the election, I think they got 18%. Because we promised change that we didn't deliver. Now, of course, without the support of the parliamentary party, it was very, very difficult for me to get my changes through. And if you have people in the parliamentary party saying it's Liz Truss's fault this has happened, not the Bank of England's fault, which is what people did and are still doing, as we've just been discussing, it is very difficult for me to deliver that change. But certainly, if the mini-budget had been allowed to succeed, we'd have lower corporation tax, bringing more companies into this country, not relocating to Ireland. We'd have duty-free shoppers coming to London rather than being diverted to Paris or Milan. We'd got on with fracking. One of the biggest reasons this country is stagnant is our high energy prices, which are now 4 times what they are in the United States. By now, fracking would be taking place in Britain. Right. And I think that would have a serious impact
and with all those goodies,
on our competitiveness.
Do you think you might actually have won? I mean, do you think you might have been able to save
I think it was I thought this in 2022, that it was a very tall order to win.
Right.
I think our best chance of winning would have been to have kept Boris. I think it was a very stupid move of some of my colleagues to undermine Boris, and they still haven't admitted that. And that's another bit of the analysis that needs to be done. But I think the second best option was pursuing the economic policies that would have started to show that we could change things. People just kept voting for change. It kept not being delivered. They kept giving us one more chance. They're now giving Keir Starmer a chance to deliver change. I think this is a hopeless prospect, but that is what people were voting for in 24 as well.
Is there a candidate in this leadership election who comes closest to your analysis and your message of change?
So far, I haven't seen any of the candidates really acknowledge how bad things are in the country as a whole and, frankly, for the Conservative Party. So I think there's been a bit of Panglossian, all we need is to unite, all we need to do is show competence, and we will be ushered back into office. They have to explain what went wrong, why things are so bad for the Conservatives, and what they're actually going to do. So take energy prices. I haven't heard anybody advocating for fracking. I haven't heard a serious discussion about what we're going to do about coal.
No.
and reopening oil and gas fields. There has been discussion about the ECHR.
Yes.
But what about the Human Rights Act? What about the Equality Act? What about the fact that Blair essentially made the judiciary less accountable by abolishing the traditional role of Lord Chancellor, and how that has totally damaged the British Constitution? Parliamentary sovereignty has been severely diminished by the Blair government. What is a Conservative leader going to do to take that on? So it's those kind of... the country is in serious trouble. What is our solution and analysis as Conservatives to fix that?
And can you see yourself endorsing at any point in this race, regardless of who it might be? Are you going to play a role in this race?
I don't think I will, no.
So. Okay. Some of the candidates have said some very interesting things in the last few days, and I just want to run a couple of them by you. Do you agree with Kemi Badenoch saying that it's axiomatic that not all cultures are equal?
Yes, I do, actually.
Okay. And what do you think she meant by that?
Well, I think she meant that this country is based on Judeo-Christian values, and that is what should prevail.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Do you agree with Rob Jenrick that the Star of David should be hung at entry points to the UK?
I'd be absolutely happy with that, yes.
You'd be happy with that. Tom Tugendhat said he is worried about his children and social media, but he wouldn't actually ban iPhones. I wonder you, as a libertarian, would make of the iPhone debate.
Well, I do think there is a case for saying that whilst adults should be able to have full control of their own lives, that children do need to be protected. We don't let children go into films of a particular nature if they're under 18. So I think there is a case for the restriction of technology to children, I do.
Okay. And James Cleverly has said that no one should be giving more than half their earnings to the state.
I definitely agree with that.
You're quite right. There hasn't been much talk about things like tax and economic policy. It's felt very culture war.
But it's the number one issue
that
I believe is affecting people in Britain.
Yes.
And why this country feels like it's in decline.
Yeah.
We went through a period in the 70s where it felt like this. We revived in the 80s and the 90s. And over the past 25 years, the left have been winning the argument. Keynesian economics is back in fashion. Wokery has been marching through our institutions. The human rights culture has become embedded in government. And at the heart of that is a declinist view. And of course it's connected to culture as well, about being proud of our country. But it's also connected to the fact that people don't feel that we're increasing in prosperity, that we're doing well.
Yeah.
The gap between America and Britain has grown hugely. If anyone goes to America and sees what people in entry-level jobs are being paid, security guards, people who work, in the public services, they will see vast disparities between the salaries of people here and the salaries of people there. And it is because we're not building enough houses, it's because we're not fracking, it's because under a Conservative government regulation has increased, it's because our taxes are too high. It's all those reasons. But for me, the Conservative leadership candidates need to analyse why that is. And my contention is because we've got a very powerful economic orthodoxy in this country that just hasn't been challenged.
You've got to tell us something that can cheer us up, because much of what you're saying is quite depressing.
Donald Trump might win.
Donald Trump might win, okay.
There we are.
That would really cheer you up. Why do you think? Why would that cheer you?
Yes, it would really cheer me up.
Why would that cheer you up?
Well, if you look at the world this is what my book 10 Years to Save the West is about. The left have been winning the argument.
Yeah.
Mainly because the right haven't been making the argument or haven't been following through on the courage of their convictions. And Trump winning in America will be a sign that the tide is turning. Because at present we have Keir Starmer in London, we've got socialists in Australia, Canada, America, France, Germany. We need to start turning the tide the other way, and this will be the first domino.
But a lot
He'll
of...
be the first domino. And Trump is anti-establishment.
Yes.
You know, the Davos World Economic Forum elite do not like Donald Trump, and
Yes.
I take that as a good sign.
Well, but I mean, neither do the courts or the police or... I mean, this is the problem, isn't it? That there are a lot of people in this country, and a lot of conservative voters in this country, who don't like Donald Trump, and who sometimes hear people on the right, including myself, I quite like Donald Trump. They hear people like us expressing some sympathy, and they think we're weird. Is there a risk that we're hitching our wagon to the wrong star, or is it the other way around? Our wagon to the wrong star here?
Well, I just say, look at what Trump did in office. His foreign policy was much better. You know, he held Iran to account. He took action on Ukraine and Russia in a way that Obama hadn't.
Yes.
He was much tougher on China. But domestically, he did all the things that unleashed the American economy. Supply-side reforms, regulatory reforms, tax cuts, fracking, building oil pipelines, and he made the American economy successful. Yeah, and that is what Biden has been riding off, despite some of his poorer economic policies. So
he's also a protectionist, and you don't like that, do you?
I would say he's a deal maker.
The deal maker.
Trump made deals with the likes of Japan. You know, we could have done a deal with Trump. We could have done a trade deal with Trump. It was our reticence that stopped that from happening, our fear of bad PR that stopped that from happening. But Trump would have done a deal with the United Kingdom, and I hope will do a deal with the United Kingdom. He's
also someone who is very, well, some people disagree with this, but I think he's quite good at handling criticism. He's got a good sense of humour. You've come under attack from protest groups and things like that. How do you respond to that? How do you feel about some of the things that people do and say? I mean, because, you know, is there a point at which you come to which you think, I've got to try and laugh this off? Or is it just too awful to laugh at it?
Well, it depends if it's funny or not.
Right.
I mean, I just think these so-called left-wing comedians just aren't funny. You know, they are in power at the moment. You know, their people are in power. The left-wing orthodoxy is in power.
Yes.
So their jokes aren't funny.
Right.
Because they're not taking the mick out of the people who actually need their egos punctured. So, but, you know, in terms of criticism, as I've said, a lot of the criticisms of me are they're not against the policy prescription I put forward. You know, they don't say, actually, I don't agree with Liz Truss on fracking because of X, or I don't agree with Liz Truss on corporation tax because of Y, or I think Liz Truss is wrong about constitutional reform, you know, and the judiciary because of Z. It's just like, they're just very vague criticisms.
Right.
And I think it's a symptom of this country not being serious about analysing what our problems are.
Yes.
And the media in Britain is particularly focused on gossip, he said, she said, that kind of reportage, rather than saying what's actually wrong with the country. And this has led Labour getting into power, being able to say, the reason we will be better is the Conservatives are evil and incompetent, rather than actually saying the reason this country has problems is because of this policy, that policy, other policies. That's my frustration, is that it's just so shallow, a lot of the critique.
Well, half of them are in this room, so they will have heard that, and I'm sure they'll take it on board.
I don't think they will take it on board because I've said it before, and I haven't seen any change. So
right, okay. You've had I can't think of someone in public life who's had such an extraordinary career in such a short period of time. It's like a lifetime of events have been crammed into a few years. Foreign Secretary, Prime Minister, and then leading a sort of a resistance through your books and everything. This is kind of a breakfast morning TV question, but I do want to ask it. How do you do it? How do you cope? What is it that sort of gets you up in the morning and makes you think, I can continue this fight? What motivates Liz Truss?
What motivates me? It is the fight. You know, I believe
you enjoy the fight.
I enjoy the fight.
Yes.
I believe there is a battle now to save not just Britain, but Western civilization. I think that's how serious it is. I think there is a real threat. And this is why I'm concerned about the election in the United States. I'm concerned about the failure of Conservatives across the West to make the case for conservatism and implement it. And I think the sort of neo-Marxist orthodoxies of wokery or the sort of human rights culture or extreme net zero alarmism, I think those have been prevalent. So that's what motivates me, is winning that fight. I'll win it and I'll fight it in whichever way I can.
I just feel if I had been Prime Minister and lost under such egregious circumstances and then lost my seat because of Reform and Labour, I would just lock myself in my bedroom and get fat on chocolate. But are you ever tempted to do that? Is there any part of you that just sometimes wants to just go, oh, sod it, destroy the West, let it burn, and I'm going to retire and be happy and do whatever it is Liz Truss does to be happy?
This is what I do to be happy.
This is what you do.
This is what I do to be happy.
Okay, fine. Right. I'm going to move on to some questions which have come from this audience and from people reading the Telegraph. First one, this speaks to some of what you've already been saying, but it's interesting to read the questions because it tells us what centre-right voters are thinking. Do politicians run the country, or is it the civil servants? And given the statements made by a lot of civil servants after the election, ejecting the Conservatives about how they would now work again, how can reform be effectively made, assuming it should be, of course, so that the civil service returns to its traditional values of serving the country and their government rather than serving themselves and their own groupthink?
So the answer is that politicians do not run the country as much as they claim to. And no politician wants to admit how little power they actually have. And I think it's been a massive shock to Keir Starmer to go into number 10 Downing Street and realise that he cannot actually effectively do what he wants to do. Now, I think his plans are bad. I think they're malevolent. But I also believe that the government and the governance of this country is dysfunctional. Power has been outsourced. It was partly outsourced prior to Blair's government, but Blair oversaw a wholesale outsourcing. We then made it worse with the creations of organisations like the Office of Budget Responsibility. And it's now the case, without major changes, which have to be driven by Parliament. It's the only way you can really get things done in this country, a parliamentary majority repealing a lot of those laws, getting rid of a lot of those organisations. Without that, power is not going to be returned to Parliament and hence the elected government.
Okay. Someone else asked...
I find one thing just absolutely ludicrous, that the low level of media scrutiny of the people who really have power in this country. I mentioned Andrew Bailey, the Governor of the Bank of England. This man is on an 8-year term. He's pretty much unsackable. He has failed on inflation. He has failed on the regulation of LDIs. He's admitted that the market crisis of 2022 was essentially the Bank of England's fault. He's paid more than the Prime Minister, and yet he gets a thousandth of the levels of scrutiny that the Prime Minister does. Why is that? What on earth is the British media doing with its time? That's just... I could go into many, many more examples.
Yeah. Well, Sue Gray has just paid more than the... You mentioned paid more than the Prime Minister, which is the first name that jumped into my head. It used to be footballers, wasn't it? But now it's civil servants. So Kate asks, what do you think has gone wrong with society to make the nation so woke?
I think there's been a long history of problems in Britain. I think you can date a lot of them back to the Attlee government, things like the Town and Country Planning Act, as to why this country it's become too welfareist. It's become... personal responsibility has been diminished over time. So I think some of these things have quite a long legacy. But the real push on woke, and it's interesting, it's happened both sides of the Atlantic. I think it started in academia. It then filtered out into institutions like the civil service, like the BBC, and is now in the corporate sector. And I think the Equality Act in Britain was a major part of the country becoming more woke, the Gender Recognition Act, and then these things have simply been used as a ratchet to make things worse. But there's been a cultural battle that Conservatives have failed to stand up to. In fact, many Conservatives have actually gone along with it because they thought it was electorally advantageous to be seen as progressive. And this is my point about the establishment. What we've seen is a shifting from the establishment being fuddy-duddy Conservatives to the establishment now being the Liberal left. Mm-hmm. And I don't think the Conservative Party has adjusted to that fact.
Why do you think there are so few Conservatives in academia? Why don't we go into academia?
Have you ever been to a university? I think there's one job worse than being an MP, it's probably being an academic.
Right,
so.
but at some point in history, for some reason, Conservatives just ceased getting tenure and ceased trying to...
I think that academia has always... in the recent past, it has always been towards the left. I think what is now the case is just a complete intolerance for Conservatives and people on the right, such that they're hounded out of academia in a way that they wouldn't have been 30 years ago. 30 years ago, a Conservative would have been a curiosity. Now they're somebody who should be hounded out and not allowed to exist.
Yeah.
And I think the action that needs to be taken is what Trump is proposing in the US, is those institutions should be defunded if they are not allowing a broad range of beliefs. And I think we have to get much, much tougher. And one of the things that we have presided over the past 14 years is the funding of organisations that are antithetical to Conservative values. You know, whether it's Hope Not Hate, which appallingly had been funded by the Home Office, whether it's organisations in education, how on earth did we allow that to happen? And that's what needs to change.
Okay. If you had to advise a young person of one book they should read to make them a Conservative, other than your own, what should a young person be reading nowadays? Like Barry Goldwater or Hayek?
Barry Goldwater's book is very good, With No Apologies.
Right.
With No Apologies.
With No Apologies, right,
his autobiography, which is very good.
Right, okay.
I'm trying to think. I've just read a book called Next Generation Marxism, which is very good, which has talked about how the left taken over institutions, which I think is very important for Conservatives to understand. I think at present, many Conservatives still think we're in a traditional right-left battle.
Yeah.
We're not. You know, the left are using lawfare, they're using institutional capture, they're using capture of the media to promote their views, and we are way behind in fighting them in all of those arenas.
I've been asked what you think about Milei and Argentina.
I am a huge fan of Javier Milei. If Milei was standing in the Conservative leadership election, I would be backing him like a shock.
Right.
That is absolutely what we need. I think he is, on everything, he's doing the right thing. I just hope that things in Britain don't have to get as bad as they were in Argentina before we get our own version of Milei.
Rachel asks, do you plan to be back in the United States at all before the election in November?
Not at present, no. I'm just headed off to Australia, so that's my next trip.
And the question which a lot of people have asked is, are you going to return to Parliament?
I've only been out of Parliament for a few months, so I'm currently thinking about what to do. What is certainly true is I'm not going to give up on this fight.
Right.
I think this is the fight of our lifetimes, is saving Western civilization, and that is what I'm focused on.
Did you enjoy being a parliamentarian? Did you miss being on the green benches and debating? Or is there greater freedom outside of Parliament?
Well, I enjoy being in the private sector.
Right.
As a fan of free enterprise, I like that aspect of my life now. I do enjoy politics. I do enjoy debate. I think Parliament has become a shadow of its former self because so much power has been taken away from Parliament, and there's far too much showboating and emoting in Parliament rather than serious debate about what our country needs. So that was frustrating me about Parliament, and it's one of the things that needs to change in the future.
Right. I don't think you'd struggle to get back in. I don't think Liz would struggle to get nominated. Or am I? Do people want Liz back in Parliament? Come on. There you go.
The audience had to be led quite a lot there, Tim.
No,
The
they
audience
didn't.
had to be
No.
led quite a lot there.
They're just staggered by the intellectual sparks. That's what it is. They're rigged. What do your family think about you being out of Parliament and out of the limelight a bit? Are they relieved by that?
I think my family never know what's going to happen next.
Right.
They've become used to the roller coaster that is living with me.
Right. Okay. Okay. There was one thing I loved about your life in Number 10, which was the question of meal times. Can you tell us about how you used to eat in the evenings? That wasn't the book, wasn't it? That's not something you've told me privately, and I wasn't supposed to share.
I honestly can't remember what I wrote or what I've told you about meal times. You tell me what it was.
Deliveroo.
Oh, yes. This is about the difficulty of getting Deliveroo into the building.
Yes. So basically, in Number 10, I always assumed there was a chef. There was a sous chef that would feed you every night and look after your nutrition and your health.
No.
There isn't.
No.
No.
And we had a huge problem with getting I think it was a Sainsbury's delivery to Number 10. Because Sainsbury's just didn't believe that we wanted a delivery to Number 10 Downing Street. And when it arrived, it was my husband Hugh was dealing with it, when it arrived, they didn't tell us it was there because they didn't want to disturb the Prime Minister. Right. So we had a sort of empty kitchen and nothing to eat. And I think the Deliveroo ended up arriving at 70 Whitehall rather than Number 10. So just all those basic, all the basic things are quite difficult.
Right.
They're quite difficult.
There's a sort of little canteen in the basement, is that correct?
There is.
Right.
Yes.
And there was no one to do makeup or hair or anything like that?
No.
Because these are... Keir Starmer will be finding all this stuff, but of course he's got someone to pay for it, hasn't he?
Yeah, if only... I just regret not meeting Lord Ali.
If you could give the delegates of this conference one bit of hope, one positive message for the future, what is it you want them to take away from this conference?
So I believe that we will win this debate eventually. That's what I believe. I think the Labour government is already coming unstuck. I predict in the next 3 or 4 years we will have some kind of crisis. It could be an energy crisis, it could be a financial crisis, but things are heading in the wrong direction. And what is the most important thing is that we are ready for that with the right ideas that are actually going to take this country forward. And that is what we all have to focus on. So I think the short term could be very, very difficult, but I do believe that the only way our country is going to be successful is through free enterprise, lower taxes, affordable energy, anti-wokery, a belief in our sovereignty and greatness as a country. These are the things that most people in Britain believe as well. We've just had a difficult time because we have not delivered on their expectations, but it doesn't mean that the ideas themselves aren't right.
Okay. I want to thank you for coming here today, and I want to thank everyone in the audience for joining us and for asking such good questions, and thank you to everyone on the Telegraph live stream for watching. Don't forget that you can follow our live blog of all the events of the Conservative Party conference over the next few days, as we know there is much more excitement to come. Liz, thank you very much for being with us. Liz Truss.
Thank you.